Today's lesson is Chapter 12, Problem 12-2B. If you'll hold on just a minute, I'll try to get you there. Not quite there yet. I know you can see the screen, but let me get to where I need to be. All right, now you should be able to see 12-2B and Cengage. In this problem, what we're going to be learning how to do is to divide partnership income. And so there are going to be several different parts to this problem, and each part should be done separately. Treat them as if they were separate problems. There will be a lot of calculations in this particular problem, so I'll have to flip back and forth between the Excel to show you how to do this. First of all, we need to read our instructions. Dylan Howell and Dedmond Nichols have decided to form a partnership. They have agreed that Howell is to invest $50,000 and that Nichols is to invest $75,000. Howell is to devote full time to the business, and Nichols is to devote one half time. The following plans for the division of income are being considered. In the first plan, they want you to determine how to divide the income equally. Now, in this problem, we not only have one part, or part one, that is dealing with net income of $420,000, but we have an additional part of net income that's going to be $150,000. So these are treated separately again. So with Plan A, what we're going to be looking at is the division of net income for Part 1, which was $420,000. So what you have to do is you simply have to take the net income of $420,000 and you divide it equally. Since there are two partners, we're going to divide this by 2. And each partner, Howell and Nichols, will share in the net income of $420,000 equally. In other words, we're going to allow them to have each partner to have $210,000 worth of the total net income. Notice the second part also has the same two partners. The second part, the net income this time, is going to be $150,000. So we're treating this like it's a separate problem. We're going to take the $150,000 and we're going to divide it by 2 since there are two partners and there is equal division in the partnership income. $150,000 divided by 2 gives you $75,000. that each partner would have as a share of the net income of $150,000. So in this particular problem, part A just wanted you to share the net income equally between the partners. You might remember from the last lecture that there is a partnership agreement that the partners would have to agree to that start a business or a partnership form of business should have a partnership agreement. In this partnership agreement, it will state how the partners will share profits and losses. And it can be any way that the partners agree to. In the part A, it was equal division. In the next part of the problem, part B, they want you to show the dividing of partnership income in the ratio of original investments. So what we have to do is we have to look at the amount that each partner has invested, add them together to get a total. So Hal was going to invest $50,000. Nichols was going to invest $75,000. The total partnership income, or excuse me, the total partnership investment would be $125,000. Now in part B, they want it in a ratio of the original investments. So once we've determined the total amount of the investment, I'm going to take each partner's share that they contributed and divide it by the total partnership investment. So Hal invested $50,000. So I'm going to take $50,000 and divide it by the total partnership investment, which was $125,000. What this will do is it will tell me that Nichols is going to be able to share in the net income at 40%. So in the ratio of original investments, Nichols is going to get 40% of the net income. If the net income is $420,000, we would multiply 40% times 420,000, and that will give you 168,000. As his share of the 420,000. Again, that was 420,000 times 40%. We got 40% by taking 50,000 and dividing it by the total partnership income, which was 125,000. So if Hal gets 40%, then Nichols is going to get 60%. So I would take my net income of 420,000. I would multiply this by 60%, and that will give me 252,000. All right, on the second part of this problem, the net income is 150,000. The partners are still going to share in the net income in the ratio of their original investments. So 50,000 divided by 125,000 would give you 40%. We take that same 40% figure that we came up with a minute ago, and we're going to multiply this time by 150,000. $150,000 times 40% is 60,000. $150,000 would be multiplied by 60% for nickels. Again, that would have been calculated as 75,000 divided by the total investment of 125,000. 60% times 150,000 will give you nickels' share of this amount of net income, which is 90,000. In part C, we want to divide the partnership income and the ratio of time devoted to the business. So in our instructions, they tell us that Hal is to devote full time to the business, and Nichols is to devote 1/2 time. So in other words, we could create a ratio out of that information, which would state that Hal would spend twice as much time as Nichols in the partnership. So 2 to 1 is the ratio. We could also make this into fractions. If the ratio is 2 to 1, then Hal would get 2/3 and Nichols would get 1/3. So Hal would get 2/3 of the 420,000 of net income in requirement 1. So 420,000 times 2 divided by 3, Hal gets 2/3, which would be 280,000. Nichols is going to get 1/3. So 1/3 of 420,000 is 140,000. Notice the 2 of these added together should come back up to 420,000. Again, in part 2, we're applying it still in the ratio of time devoted to the business. Since Hal devotes twice as much time as Nichols does, Hal still gets 2/3 of the 150. So 150,000 times 2/3 is going to give you 100,000. Nichols would get 1/3 of 150,000, which is 50,000. In Part D, the partners are going to divide the partnership net income by taking an interest of 10% on the original investments and the remainder of 3-2. So what we have to do is a series of calculations for Part D. So what I want to do is I want to stop sharing your screen and I want to go to Excel to show you how we do these calculations. So I'm going to stop sharing our screen. We're going to share the screen again. And this time we're going to look at the Excel spreadsheet that I've prepared for you. I've prepared this spreadsheet by sections. We've already done Part A, and we've done Part D, and we've done Part C. So what I want to look at and concentrate on is Part D. Part D in Cengage told you that the net income was going to be divided by 10% interest on their investments and a ratio of 3-2. The original investments were given in this particular problem. Hal invested $50,000 and Nichols invested $75,000. Remember, their total investments were $125,000. To find the 10% interest on their original investments, we will multiply the original investments by 10%. So 10% of 50,000 will give you 5,000. That is the interest on the original investment. To find the interest on the original investment for Nichols, we would take 10% of the 75,000. That gives us 7,500. So right now, our total interest on our investment would be 5,000 for Hal and 7,500 for Nichols. What we need to do next is we need to determine the net income. Remember, there were two net incomes from Cengage. Net income number one is $420,000, and net income number two is $150,000. So we're working with $420,000 net income first. What we have to do is determine the total interest from the investments. This is one of the allowances that they told us that we were looking for, 10% interest on the investments. It's the same thing as what we calculated up on line 30. I just copied it and pasted it in here so you could see it again. 5,000 is the interest for Hal and 7,500 is the interest for Nichols. The total interest on the investments was 12,500. What you have to do is you have to find the remaining net income, which is also called the difference. To get the remaining net income, I took the net income of 420,000 and I subtracted my interest allowances of 12,500. That leaves me with a difference of 407,500. That difference has to be multiplied by the ratio for Hal. Hal's ratio was 3 times to 2 parts, or 3 to 2 parts, or 3 to 2 is the ratio. But Hal got 3 and the other partner gets 2. So 3/5 is what we would have to multiply by this difference to get the amount of the net income that would be shared by Hal. So you can see the difference was 407,500. I multiplied it by 3/5, which is Hal's part of the ratio, and that gave me 244,500. That is the difference times the ratio. The difference times the ratio for Nichols. Nichols had 2/5. In other words, we take 3 and we add 2 to it. That gives us 5. 2 divided by 5 is the fraction for Nichols. So we take that same difference of 407,500 and we multiply it by 2/5, and that will give us Nichols' share of the difference, 163,000. The final thing that we have to find is the total net income that's distributed to the partners. The total net income from Hal consists of 5,000 plus 244,500, an amount of 249,500. So on part 1, Hal gets 249,500 of the net income. Nichols would get what's remaining. Nichols gets 7,500 from his interest on his capital investment, plus the difference split by his ratio of 163,000. So 7,500 plus 163,000 will give you 170,500. To check your work, it's always a good idea to add both of the net income amounts together to make sure that it comes back to the net income for part 1, which was 420,000. That gives you a check figure that will help you in knowing that you're going in the right direction. So 249,500 would go to Hal, and Nichols would get 170,500. In this problem, you'll remember there were 2 different sets of net income. The net income for part 2 is based on 150,000. Your interest on your investments for each partner is calculated just as we've done it before. Is 10% of the original investment of 50,000 for Hal, and 10% of the original investment of Nichols of 75,000 will give you 7,500 for Nichols. The total interest on the investments was 12,500. This time we are going to subtract this 12,500 from the 150,000, and that will give you the difference that is to be split by the ratio for Hal. The ratio for Hal is still going to be 3/5. So 3/5 of 137,500 will give you 82,500 for Hal. 2/5 of 137,500 will give you the difference, which would be split to nickels, 55,000. The total net income that would be distributed to Hal is the 5,000 of his interest investment plus 82,500, which will give you 87,500. So for the net income of 150,000, Hal would get 87,500, and Nichols will get 62,500. And again, we have added the 7,500, 10% on the original investment, plus the difference, which was 137,500 times 2/5. That's how we get the 55,000. So 7,500 plus 55,000 is 62,500. Again, it may be a good idea for you to add the two of these together to make sure that it comes up with the net income. And that's how you complete Part D. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen and I'm going to go back to Cengage. And I'm going to share that screen with you. Let me try it again. And finally, you can see the screen again. So for Part D, from our spreadsheet, we got 249,500 for Hal and 170,500 for Nichols. For Hal's share of the 150,000, it was 87,500. And 62,500. Now we're ready to look at Part E. And remember, we're doing each one of these parts separately. They're as if they're their own separate problems. In Part E, we want to look at the interest of 10% on the original investments plus salary allowances of 38,000 to Hal and 19,000 to Nichols. Once we get all of our salary allowances combined to find the total allowances, we're going to take the difference between the net income in Part 1 of 420,000 and the total allowances, and we're going to divide those equally. So there's three parts to this that we're having to keep up with. So again, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to take you to the Excel spreadsheet. All right, you should be able to see the spreadsheet now. I'm going to move it down to Part E that we're working on this time. And Part E told us that the net income is divided first by 10% interest on the investment. We calculate the 10% interest on the investment just like we did in the last part. The original investments for Hal was $50,000 and Nichols was $75,000. 10% of the original investments would give you $5,000 for Hal and $7,500 for Nichols. 10% of $50,000 is $5,000. 10% of $75,000 is $7,500. In this problem, we're going to also consider our salary allowances. The salary allowances were given in the instructions to the problem, Part E. Hal is going to get $38,000 and Nichols would get $19,000. So $38,000 and $19,000 I just recorded here. The next part is to find the total allowances so far. Right now, the total of the allowance on the interest off of the original investments was $12,500. The total of the salary allowances was $57,000 for both partners. You combine both of these together to find the total allowances. Then we're going to take the net income of Part 1, which was given at $420,000. We're going to calculate the total allowances so far, which was $69,500. We're going to find the difference, and then it tells us to divide the remainder of that difference equally. So the difference between $420,000 and $69,500 is $350,500. I'm going to divide that equally as it told us in the problem. As there are two partners, I would divide it by 2, and that would give me $175,250 that would go to each partner. Now in this part, I just restated what we had to try to get it in a better format for you to see all of this. So I'm going to start with the original investments, which was 10% on the original investment. For Nichols, that was $5,000. We gave Nichols a salary allowance of $38,000 that was given in the problem. And then we split the difference by 2, which came up to $175,250. The total amount of net income that we would distribute to Hal of the 200 and of the 420,000, 218,250 goes to Hal. For Nichols, we added up the interest investment for Nichols, the salary allowance, and the difference that was divided by 2. Combine all those together, the total amount of net income would be $201,750. These two answers are what go into Cengage. Now you can total this up just to make sure that your calculations are correct. So I would add the total net income that was distributed to Hal plus the total net income that would be distributed to Nichols, a total of $420,000. For part 2 of this problem, we're using the same information, except the net income is going to be $150,000. So in other words, my total allowances of $69,500 would not change. They'll be the same as what we calculated earlier. It would be the total interest on the original investment plus the total salary allowances give you the total allowances of $69,500. This time the difference is going to be $80,500 that would be divided equally between the two partners. So each partner is going to get $40,250 of the remainder. So I simply restated that down here by showing the original investments of each partner, the interest on the original investments, the salary allowances of each partner, and this difference that was divided by 2. The total net income for Hal would be $5,000 plus $38,000 plus $40,250. In other words, $83,250 is the share of net income that would go to Hal. For Nichols, the interest investment was $7,500 plus $19,000 for the salary allowance, and the difference of $40,250 gave him a total share of the net income of $66,750. And again, the two of these together should come back up to $150,000 for checking your work. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to bring up Cengage. So bear with me just a second. So you should be able to see Cengage once again. For part E, for $420,000, Hal got a share of $218,250. And Nichols got a share of $201,750. Of the $150,000, Hal got a share of $83,250. And Nichols got a share of the net income of $66,750. So for Plan F, you're going to do the same thing as Plan E, except that Hal is also to be allowed a bonus equal to 20% of the amount by which net income exceeds the total salary allowances. So this time they've given us yet another part to deal with. So again, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to go to the Excel spreadsheet to show you how I've calculated the amounts for these partners. You should be able to see the spreadsheet again. I'm going to move this sheet down to Part F. And so for Part F from Cengage, it says the net income is to be divided by 10% on the original investments. They're given salary allowances of $38,000 to Hal, $19,000 to Nichols. But in this one, a bonus to Hal would be given equal to 20% of the amount to which net income exceeds the total salary allowances. So again, your 10% investment, interest on the investment was $5,000. That was 10% of $50,000 for Hal, and for Nichols, it was 10% of $75,000. The salary allowances also were given at $38,000 and $19,000 to Nichols. The thing that is different about this particular problem from the previous one that we just did, E, the difference between F and E is that in addition to what we did for E, we're going to give Nichols a bonus, we're going to give a bonus to Hal equal to 20% of the amount to which net income exceeds the total salary allowance. So the net amount in the first part was $420,000. The net income of $420,000 would be subtracted from the total salary allowance, which is $57,000. In other words, the net income from one was $420,000 minus the total salary allowance of $57,000. Whatever that gives you, you would multiply by 20%, and that amount is $72,600 that you would give to Hal. Now, what that $72,600 means is that our total allowances now would be for the interest on the capital investment, the salary allowances, and the amount that we gave to Hal as a bonus. The total allowances is $142,100. Those allowances would be subtracted from the net income to get a difference that would be divided equally between the partners. When you take $277,900, the difference between the net income and total allowances, you're going to divide this by two partners. The equal amount that would go to each partner is $138,950. I have restated this information once again to put it all in one place so you can see all of how we calculated the partner's share of net income. Remember that Hal got a 10% share on his original investment. He got $38,000 as a salary allowance. He also got a 20% bonus of the amount of which net income exceeded the total salary allowances. The division of the remainder is $138,950. Then Hal's share of the net income is going to be $254,550. Again, this was the original investment plus the salary allowance plus the bonus plus the division of the remainder that went to each partner, which will give you $254,550 as Hal's share of the $420,000 net income. For Nichols, we do the same thing. Nichols got interest allowance of $7,500, a salary allowance of $19,000. He did not get a bonus allowance, but he was able to share in the difference. The total is $165,450. That would be Nichols' share of the net income of $420,000. In part 2, you'll remember they changed the net income to $150,000. The original investments were the same as they have been in this problem. The salary allowances are the same as they have been. But this time, the bonus to Hal is going to be $18,600. You can find that by taking the net income of part 2, which was $150,000. We would subtract out the salary allowances of $57,000, and that will leave us with an amount that we have to multiply by 20% to get $18,600. So once we give 20% bonus to Hal, the amount of the allowances have gone up to a total allowance of $88,100. And that would be found by taking the $12,500 interest allowance plus the salary allowance of $57,000 plus the bonus to Hal of $18,600. That gives you the total allowances. To find the difference, we would take the net income amount of $150,000. We would subtract $88,100 from that, and that will give you $61,900. That would be divided by the two partners, which will give you $30,950. I've restated this to try to clean it up a little bit. Notice that Hal has $5,000 from his original interest off of his original investment, $38,000 for the salary allowance. The bonus to Hal, which was $18,600, and the division of the remainder, which was $30,950. If you combine all of these amounts together, it will give you $92,550 is Hal's share of the net income of $150,000. For Nichols, we would add up the interest on the capital investments, the salary allowance, and the division of the remainder. The total is $57,450. And so that's how we would complete the spreadsheet. So again, I'm going to stop sharing this spreadsheet with you. I'm going to go back to share the application screen, and then we're going to look at Cengage. For F, from the spreadsheet, we determined that $254,550 would go to Hal, out of the 420,000, and 165,450 would go to nickels. For Hal, of the 150,000, 92,550 would go to Hal, and 57,450 will go to nickels. And that ends this particular problem. So I'm going to stop sharing this with you. And I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you for joining me today.